All right, welcome back in here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andy Mack. Let's talk about another high-profile case, and now a surprise witness potentially coming forward to testify against Brian Kohberger, allegedly accused of killing the 4 University of Idaho students back in 2022. The New York Post here, a post saying a woman claiming to be a DoorDash driver on the night of the Idaho murders emerges as a surprise witness at the Kohberger trial, saying she saw Brian there. Of course, the woman claiming to be a DoorDash driver who dropped off food to victims Anna Kernodle minutes before a home invasion stabbing spree killed her, her boyfriend, and 2 roommates, has emerged as a surprise second eyewitness to testify in Kohberger's upcoming murder trial. As she told police she saw him at the scene. The driver revealed herself in a police body cam video from an alleged DUI stop taken in September of 2024. So we're following it closely here on Live Now from Fox, and we're also following the timeline of this case. And of course, here is another post from Matt Finn here on Live Now from Fox talking about what the next steps will look like as the Idaho murders trial moving forward, the August start date after Kohberger requested a delay. The judge says they will take the matter under advisement and make a written decision. But in the meantime, he fully encourages everyone to continue as if the trial will begin on August the 11th. Let's be joined right now here outside of the courthouse in Boise, Idaho by Fox's Kennedy Hayes. Kennedy, thank you so much for joining us. Describe the timeline. How on schedule are we?
Andy, well, that was the main focus of today's hearing. There was one of 2. The first one was open to the public. Second one was closed. And Judge Stephen Hippler, as you mentioned, said that the trial is likely to still start on its scheduled date. That's August 11th. And this was despite the defense's assertion that this may conclude or be influenced by previous media coverage. Now, the hearing lasted about 30 minutes, and both sides talked about both the schedule and media coverage in this case.
Continuance is necessary to protect his due process rights, his rights to a fair trial, his rights to effective assistance of counsel, rights to confrontation, Mr. Kohberger's right to present a full defense, and if it should come to it, a fair sentencing hearing and to be free of cruel and unusual punishment.
A scorched the earth investigation is not what's required, and on the record before the court should exercise its discretion to deny the motion.
Defense says they need more time to review evidence and look into family history, information they say could help him avoid the death penalty. They also pointed to a Dateline NBC episode they claim violated the judge's gag order and could taint the jury pool. The state pushed back, arguing a fair jury can be seated even with the media attention. Kohberger, wearing a white shirt, looked more expressive than usual in court. He's accused of stabbing 4 students to death in November of 2022 and could face the death penalty if convicted. There was also a closed hearing today again on a sealed defense motion involving a possible alternative suspect. Now, the judge hasn't ruled on that motion or whether the trial date will officially change, but jury selection is slated to begin on July 30th, and we are expecting to see 12 jurors with 8 alternates. Andy? All
right, thank you so much. It's so very interesting as they're still planning on, at least at this point, the August 11th date. And I do want to get into the other big coming forward new information about that second eyewitness, the alleged DoorDash driver. Was there any indication inside the courtroom, any talk about that, or are those just rumors outside the courtroom of who could potentially testify right now?
And well, Andy, I was looking out to see if that was mentioned during today's hearing. It was not, at least during the open portion that I was sitting in on. But we do know that the jury is not going to be sequestered during deliberations. They'll only, during the trial, they'll only be sequestered during deliberations. And privacy was a big discussion today. That media coverage mentioned in the Dateline report, but also an Amazon book that will be coming out, the defense mentioned. So definitely privacy and witnesses are still a big part of how this trial will unfold starting August 11th.
That is so very true. And of course, the media playing such a big role in this. We'll see if it has any impact on this, because that DoorDash driver allegedly on YouTube, the video initially came out. Kennedy Hayes, thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. Thank you so much. All right, great reporting there as always. Still moving forward with that August 11th date in the Brian Kohberger trial, as he is accused in the killing of those 4 University of Idaho students. And we watched it unfold so very dramatically, the manhunt for this individual in Moscow, Idaho. And of course, this again, the post from the New York Post talking about this. A second surprise eyewitness has emerged in the Idaho murders case, as the DoorDash driver was allegedly on the scene just mere minutes ahead of the home invasion. Of course, the victim, Xana Kernodle, her boyfriend, 2 roommates. The driver revealed herself in a police body cam footage from an alleged DUI stop taken in September of 2024, posted it weeks later to the YouTube account, which publishes law enforcement videos obtained through public records requests. So, of course, in the video, they say, quote, "I have to testify in a big murder case because I'm the DoorDash driver." So, yeah, the officer asked her which case, and she says, quote, "the murder case with the college girls." So, following this very closely here on Live Now from Fox, let's take you out inside of some of these proceedings there in Boise, Idaho, involving Brian Kohberger. And you'll see it's a Zoom style with all of the different cameras. And in the top left portion of your screen, you'll see Brian Kohberger in his white shirt.
The media coverage of this high-profile case, non-dissemination orders that were addressed in courts, and then the grand jury materials that we had to fight to get access to before we could properly challenge the grand jury indictment. We faced issues with discovery, particularly with the IGG materials. We spent a great deal of time trying to get access to those materials. Those were ultimately, what we could get was ultimately presented in a motion to suppress, and that's preserved should there be a conviction in this case. We faced venue issues in this case, culminating in the change of venue and bringing us to Ada County. At the first hearing in this courtroom, we discussed the discovery issues and not having read everything and being ready with a full investigation in this case. That was apparent through our motions to strike the death penalty, our motions to compel expert disclosures filed in September and December of 2024, and requests for more time to file our motions in limine that was granted in January of 2025. Throughout the course of the motions in limine and then a motion to strike death based on discovery issues in February and March of this year, the record is replete with notice that we are not prepared to go to trial in this case. The discovery is vast and we have not had a chance to review it all. That we met deadlines for experts shows our dedication to comply with court orders. It does not depict effective counsel ready to go to trial on this case. We would submit that it's the court's responsibility to assess this motion to continue with heightened due process that's required in death penalty cases. The death penalty case is different. That comes from Ford versus Wainwright at 477 U.S. 399 at 411. The court must be sensitive to safeguard every avenue of due process. The Idaho Supreme Court said the qualitative difference between death and other penalties calls for a greater degree of reliability when death is imposed, and that comes from State versus Creech, 105 Idaho, 362 at 383. Looking at all of the constitutional rights Mr. Kohberger has, effective assistance of counsel really becomes the crux of how all of these other rights are covered for Mr. Kohberger. And effective assistance of counsel applies both to the merits phase and the penalty phase of a death penalty case. The courts are guided and counsel is guided by the American Bar Association guidelines on capital cases. Wiggins versus Smith, 539 U.S. 510 at 524, said the ABA guidelines are guides to determine what is reasonable. And that's talking about reasonable performance by defense counsel in a capital case. The Ninth Circuit in Andrews versus Davis at 944 F3D 1092 at 1109 relies on the ABA guidelines as the proper measure to test an attorney's investigation. In Idaho, Our public defender statutes reference the ABA guidelines as applying.
All right, just wanted to take you inside of that hearing briefly, as they're still targeting that August 11th date for the beginning of the Brian Kohberger trial. And of course, they also mentioned just the media around this and what has come even before the trial has set to commence, as Brian Kohberger accused in the killing of those 4 University of Idaho students back in November of 2022. All right.